Human refuge. I felt an uplifting spirit last night as we were headed north and we crossed into Grant County. Obviously, it was the spirit of LaVoy, Finicum, and all of the patriots who are with us who care about taking a stand for freedom. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We are going to start off this evening's activities with an invocation. And Dave, I already screwed it up. Trailer. Dave Trailer.
Lord, we thank you for being able to gather here as friends and loved ones in Eastern Oregon. The messages we received tonight be the truth, give us discernment to understand them. Our elected leaders, give them the moral courage to act and follow the oath of office and do right by this country. And Lord, look after our troops that are scattered around the world. They stand in harm's way, and they're our first line of defense for the freedom that we treasure. Lord, you have said, if we will humble our face, look towards you, mend our ways, that you will hear our cry and heal our land. Let us always know that the bedrock foundation of this country, the patriots that started it, has always been in God we trust. Amen.
Thank you, Dave. Now we'll do this a little better. Please stand, everyone. Gentlemen, remove cover. Morgan Tenney. Morgan, are you ready? This young man is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Outstanding. Would you like your cap back, Morgan? Great job. All right. Stay standing, please. Now I'd like to introduce Grant County's finest, Dakota Ballou, who's going to sing us the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early lights what so proudly we hailed, and the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
That's what you call getting started right. Outstanding, Dakota. Acapella standing up in front of you, just like the cowgirls did on the range. You may be seated. Thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Trent Luce. I came here from Nebraska, and I've had several folks say, well, why would a feller from Nebraska come? I heard there was a great spaghetti feed, so I wanted to come and be a part of that. My wife and I ranch in central Nebraska. We have 100 beef cows, we have 100 sows, we have 30 horses. I'm sixth generation and Kelly is fourth generation Tim Smith. We have 3 daughters, 19, 14, and 11. That river of estrogen is another reason why I came to Grant County, Oregon to be with you instead of being in Loup City, Nebraska. But the truth of the matter is that 18 years ago now, Kelly and I recognized that our freedoms on individual properties was eroding. And I know that all of my friends in the West think that so many times the erosion of freedoms and the erosion of property rights, Bill Norton, actually is a Western issue. It is. Everything west of the Atlantic Ocean. And it goes from one coast to the other. And I find it very interesting, as we all become better students of history, what leads us here. And Kelly and I have tried to find every avenue possible to make sure that people understand what it means to be a United States citizen, what it means to live in a representative republic and maintain the freedoms that our founding fathers envisioned for us. And it does not just come automatically. It comes with us exercising the rights that have been protected for us by the individuals for generations. Which is why, at this time, I am going to ask, and please remain standing, anyone who has served in the United States military or continues to serve, please stand up. We would like to recognize you. Now, anyone who's been a civil servant, so please remain standing. Law enforcement locally, fire department, anything that helps people when you drop everything and go to help improve human lives. If you've been a part of that, please stand. We'd like to recognize you. Thank you. I thought that would be that impressive. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it. At this time, there are some other individuals I would like to recognize. I'm just humbled by all of the folks that just go out of their way to stand for freedom. I was just handed this. Kim has these. He's from Burns. I spent 4 hours yesterday with Susie Hammond. What a phenomenal lady and family, and really is the impetus why we're here this evening. Also like to recognize, I think they scattered on me like a group of church mice, but Carol, Lisa, Angie Bundy, they're with us this evening. Carol, I'm not sure how many times you've been referred to as a church mouse, but it happened right here in Grant County, okay? Also with the Bundys, Heather and Sarah Reed Buck. Thank you also those young ladies also for joining us. Because she's right there, and she has become an undaunting leader for so many, Shauna Cox. Please stand and be recognized. Cowboys ain't girls anymore, I think is what George Strait said. Ken Medenbach. Where's Ken? Ken's here. Jeff Banta. Not guilty. Guy and Regina Finicum. Please stand and be recognized. I think that's Guy trying to give me smoke signals about the next couple I'm going to introduce. Is that what he was telling me, Tara? Yeah. All right. David and Nelda Finicum, LaVoy and Guy Finicum's father and mother, please stand and be recognized. Jody Finicum. Jody, I was going to save you for the keynote speech at the end, but Jeanette just didn't want that to happen. She wanted you to have your minute right now. Thank you, Jody, for also joining us. We're going to start off this meeting with me and a few direct comments. Everybody in this room knows that there are emotions running high. Everybody also knows that at this time in this country, we have many individuals that have lost what I think is the backbone of our freedom and our country, and that is respect. As the moderator of this evening's activities, I will expect that we will have emotional, very constructive dialogue, and I hope that everybody who has something to say gets the opportunity to express themselves. If for any reason, shape, or form, this moderator deems that you are not being respectful, your opportunity to speak will be gone. And that applies on either side of the equation, if there are two sides. My point is that we have the opportunity to really take a stand and make something happen, and it only comes from bringing together people that might not always agree, but respectfully at the end of the day saying, we're going to move forward. In 1867, our nation was torn with civil war. Quite frankly, I don't think there's a time since 1867 that the United States of America has had the division that we have right now here today. The thing about 1867 is that there was a group of cowboys, primarily in South Texas. We refer to them as vaqueros, drovers. Those individuals risked their lives crossing rivers, going through homesteader territory, going through Indian country. And those cowboys, in a mere 12-year period of time, brought 6 million head of Texas longhorn cattle from South Texas up what is now known as the Chisholm Trail, ultimately loaded on a railhead, hauled into Illinois, where they were fed on grass, fattened, went to Chicago, and then a guy by the name of Augustus Swift found a way to build a refrigerated rail car and sent that refrigerated protein supply much needed to the East Coast, which was the ravaged areas after the Civil War. It's pretty easy and clear to see that it was the cowboy. By the way, the image of the cowboy was created in that very short 12-year period, and right next to that, Stars and Stripes, is still the image around the world that resonates the United States of America. So you see, it's pretty clear, if we know our history, to learn that it was the cowboy and the intestinal fortitude that reconnected the United States at what was clearly one of the most divisive times in our country. That, in itself, is why I made a trip to Harney County the first week of January. That is why I came back here, because we are being led by the actions and the spirit of one man who knew that it was one man, a cowboy, taking a stand that can make all the difference in the world. January 20th, 2017 was an exciting day for a lot of folks in this country, including me. But he, in his inaugural address, Donald Trump, our president, said he's giving it back to we the people. That leaves it up to we the people to stand up and recapture those values and those ideals and those freedoms that the Constitution does not grant to us, that we are given by God, but the Constitution guarantees. And we're going to hear about that through the rest of the night. But what I want to say about this point in time in our nation's history, and hopefully sets the tone for everything that we're going to talk about as we go forward, it still resides upon us as individual citizens to stand up and achieve the freedoms that we know we inherently have. We live in a representative republic, folks. And one other thing that I think is vitally important and that we need to think about. It does not bode us well for the future of the United States of America if we as individual citizens do not trust and believe in our government. We need to find a way to turn this new day into bringing together all of the vast and the varied-minded folks, how we go forward, and get the trust back so that we can be the United States of America again. And we have the opportunity, thanks to the sacrifices of so many in this room, and that is where we're going to go forward as we continue on this evening. Garrett Smith. I'm going to do better than that, Garrett. I just want you, I know you were wanting to be out there a mile away and make this walk like Miss America or something. In case you don't know, oh, you know what, before I do that, I'm going to talk about an Iowa farmer. Because there was an Iowa farmer who actually spent his entire life taking care of God-given natural resources and converting them into the essentials of life that improve mankind: food, fiber, pharmaceuticals, and fuel. Because that's ultimately what we do, manage God's resources to improve human lives. Well, he perished after a long, fruitful life. He went to the heavens, and he went to St. Peter's gate, and he said, "My name is John Smith." And St. Peter said, "Well, sorry, we don't have John Smith on the gate. We can't let you through the pearly gates into heaven." Well, there has to be a mistake, St. Peter, because you see, I dedicated my entire life, 4 generations, to taking care of God's resources and producing things that man needed to make a better life. Nope, you're not on the list. No farmer today. So St. Peter hits the chute. Farmer goes to hell. Wasn't long and farmer ingenuity was taking over. And this farmer was creating, he had duct tape, he had baling wire. He started making things pretty livable in hell, and it got pretty comfortable. Well, God got wind of this, and he said, "Hey, devil, I understand you got a farmer down there. We made a mistake. He was supposed to be through the pearly gates and into heaven." Devil said, "No, God, you know the story. Once you're in hell, you're always in hell." Well, then God got a little upset uncharacteristically, and he said, "Devil, listen. Either you give me back my farmer that we missed, or I'm going to file a lawsuit against you." The devil just laughed, and he said, "Well, good luck finding an attorney up there." Now are you ready, Garrett Smith? In case you didn't know, Garrett Smith's an attorney. The only feller within 1,000 miles of John Day, Oregon wearing a tie. You didn't need a good joke to learn that he was an attorney. Poor kid. Already generating sympathy for the attorney. Nice job. Come on up here, Garrett. Garrett's a host of Liberty Religious Radio. He brought his wife and 2 kids. Young man, it's all yours. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that introduction. For any of you that have seen the Robin Williams movie called Hook, I'm not that kind of lawyer. So I did want to start out, though, with just a little tribute to LaVoy. He really has changed my life. When I think of LaVoy Finicum, I think of the seal that Benjamin Franklin proposed for the U.S. seal. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Thomas Jefferson loved this motto so much that he made it his personal seal. LaVoy embodied that. He stood up to tyrants. And not only that, his actions and his sacrifice have inspired many of us here to be better husbands, fathers, and countrymen. You've come from a long way. A lot of us have come from out of state. That is a big impact that he's made. And not only that, he illustrated that great line from Patrick Henry that says, "Give me liberty or give me death." If we can embody that as well, we will save the freedoms that we have with God's help. I want to talk a little bit about constitutional sheriffs. The events that happened last year could have changed drastically had there been a constitutional sheriff involved. We need them. We need constitutional sheriffs. Many people who advocate against constitutional sheriffs say that there's no such thing because the Constitution doesn't use the word sheriff once. That may be true, but by that same argument, I can say that there is no Federal Reserve and there's no BLM. Even though the word sheriff is not in the Constitution, the reason that is because the sheriff is not a federal officer, and his rights and duties are not listed in a federal document because he is a local representative that's closest to the people and willing to stand between the people they represent and the federal government to stop overreach. That is what we need. Makes me think of those old westerns. I always, when I was young, I'd sit with my grandpa and we'd watch John Wayne movies. Well, the sheriff, that's exactly what they're supposed to do. Fight outlaws. That's what they do in those movies. That role has not changed in all the years that sheriffs have been around. And who would have guessed? Well, let me just say, outlaws by definition act outside of the law. Who would have guessed that our very own federal and state agencies would become those outlaws? We need the sheriffs to step in, to keep them in check, and to establish checks and balances like the founders intended. The sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer, and I'm going to go into why they are. But when you ask someone who the chief law enforcement officer is, you'll get different answers depending on who you ask. If you ask people from my profession, all the experts in the legal industry are trying to destroy the role of the constitutional sheriff. They claim that the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer. They say that a district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer. If you ever experience this, you can quickly tell them why those people are not chief law enforcement officers. A law enforcement officer is from the executive branch. And how can someone who spends all their time in the judicial branch also be an executive? That's a violation of separation of powers. So even though the legal dictionary states that the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer, that district attorneys are the chief law enforcement officers in their counties, that's simply not true. I saw another post on, one of these Facebook posts when someone asked who the chief law enforcement officer was. And they said, well, it kind of depends on jurisdiction. If you're in the city, then it's the police department. If you're, in the county, it's the sheriff. If you're in the state, it's the ranger. And if, you're in the country, it's the marshal. But that still begs the question, if all these officials are gathered in the same room, who has ultimate authority? It's the one named as the chief law enforcement officer. The role of the sheriff was established all the way back in 500 AD in England. There was a sheriff put in place that served papers, that carried out and executed the law. When the colonies were established, back before the Constitution even, they all had sheriffs that followed common law. Even as recently as 100 years after the founding of the nation. At the time, people still understood the role of the sheriff. Like we have lost that today. But even back then, in 1870, the Wisconsin Supreme Court explained why the sheriff was not mentioned in the Constitution. They said, "Now it is quite true that the Constitution nowhere defines what powers, rights, and duties shall attach or belong to the office of sheriff. But there can be no doubt that the framers of the Constitution had reference to the office with those generally recognized legal duties and functions belonging to it in this country and in the territory when the Constitution was adopted." It doesn't need to be defined. Common law affects every day of our lives. And by common law, the sheriff was the chief law enforcement officer, and even in recent time, if we look at the Prince versus U.S. case, a lot of you may know Sheriff Mack. He was one of the plaintiffs in this case, not wanting to implement the Brady Bill. He said no to the federal government. He stood up. He took a stand on behalf of his citizens. And in that case, the Supreme Court recognized him and Prince as the chief law enforcement officers. Even as recently as last year, July 13th, 2016, in an executive order by President Obama that instituted more gun control, for those of you who are familiar with NFA items, it affected how you register those. And even in that executive order, the sheriff is named as the chief law enforcement officer. There's no question here. And yet, we'll continue to see that people will change that. They will try to change that, number one, through education, and number two, through legislation. We don't only need constitutional sheriffs, we need constitutional people to support constitutional sheriffs. There are just over 3,000 counties in the United States. So just over 3,000 sheriffs. That means that there's only one sheriff per 100,000 people in the United States. They can't do it alone. We need to step up, we need to support them, and we need to continue to educate not only ourselves, but our children in constitutional principles of freedom and liberty. What are the duties of the sheriff as the chief law enforcement officer? Well, they preserve the peace. They're officers of the peace, and they preserve that peace in their county. They also protect citizens from federal and state overreach. A lot of people are familiar with the concept of separation of powers, that we have, a legislative body, an executive body, a judiciary, and that they divide powers to establish checks and balances. I went through public school, and I never once heard about division of powers, or maybe dual sovereignty is another way to put it. But this is not a horizontal separation, but a vertical separation. The federal government does not have precedence over state government, which does not have precedence over counties. There's a division, a vertical division or balance of powers there. And the sheriff has two important duties that they maintain in preserving the county and the peace within the county. One is called nullification, the other is called interposition. And these actually come from two of our founding fathers. The first, nullification, comes from Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Kentucky Resolutions of 1798. He was the vice president at the time he wrote this, and he wrote it anonymously, so just to not influence people saying, well, he's the vice president. But in that, and I won't read it all, but you can go home and read it. It's in resolution number 8. He talks about how we cannot put power in one man or one body of men on earth. And that when there's cases of abuse of delegated powers within the Constitution, the members of the general government being chosen by the people, a change by the people would be the constitutional remedy. But where powers are assumed which have not been delegated, a nullification of the act is the rightful remedy. The state can do this, the county can do this. There are federal decrees and laws that are made every day that infringe on liberty, that infringe on constitutional principles. Nullify them. That is a remedy that we have through the Constitution. The Virginia Resolution of 1978 was penned by James Madison, the father of the Constitution. He says that there are limited and plain delegations within the Constitution. And anything that goes beyond that is no further valid because they're not enumerated. And when this happens, the states who are parties to the Constitution not only have the right, but they are bound in duty to interpose and stop the progress of evil. Interposition is inserting yourself between the overreacher and the innocent, the people that are trying to, stand up and have their rights being taken away, like the Hammonds. We had a good example of LaVoy interposing himself, becoming someone to speak for those who can speak for themselves or who are being silenced by those in power. Those who uphold the Constitution must uphold these principles as well. Nullify overreaching acts and also take action and interpose when the conflict arises. I look across the room. This is a great turnout. Many of us are like-minded, and the reason we come is because we see that there are problems. One of the problems is the federal government's overreach with the land that they own. I was pulling up some statistics. The federal government owns 28% of the United States. 92% of the land that the federal government owns is in the 12 western states. This impacts us every day. They're acting outside of the law, and as such should be treated like outlaws, and constitutional sheriffs can put them in their place and establish those boundaries that were already enumerated within the Constitution. They need our help, but they need to be educated, and they need to take those stands as well. What's on the horizon for constitutional sheriffs? They'll be stripped of that title of Chief Law Enforcement Officer unless we're educating correctly and we're fighting against federal and state legislation. Once a law is in place, it's really hard to change. They change the definitions on us. So they sell us on one thing, and once the law's there, then, hey, let's just change the definition and continue to do what we do. A great example, I think, of this is in 1913 with the 16th Amendment. They said, well, let's sell this to the people as a soak the rich scheme. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we won't tax income, we won't tax wage income, we're just going to tax interest income. So people that have a lot of money and they invest will tax what they get from their investments. Well, that's how it started. But once you get that foot in the door, look where we are now. A couple examples of how our laws are changing the sheriff's capacity. In Colorado, in Denver, they elected to remove the office of sheriff completely from their county. So there's at least one county I know of that doesn't have a sheriff. If that continues to happen, who then will rise up and be that interposing, nullifying protector of the people? I'm from Utah. Last year they passed a bill, HB 276, and they created something quite interesting. They said, well, the federal government owns so much of Utah, we need to take our lands back. So they created a DLM, a Department of Land Management. Changing the hands of the masters doesn't solve the problem. Taking it back to the state and not putting it to the people continues the problem. And not only did they do that, but in the document where they established the DLM, they said that the DLM, whoever is in charge of the DLM, becomes the Chief Law Enforcement Officer when there's an issue regarding wildlife. Does that sound familiar? I think we could all say grass could be considered wildlife, sagebrush. All of our land, where we live, can be considered wildlife. And they say, oh no, it only applies in certain situations and it's very limited. Don't fall for those tricks. Even when we, we educated and we spent a lot of time fighting that bill, it still passed. There needs to be more of us. There needs to be, not just a few of us, those that are gathering in this room. We need to take what we learn. We need to spread it and to share it, and that's how we'll preserve the Constitution. It's not by one man alone, but as evidenced by LaVoy Finicum, he can do a lot. But we also need to continue that. So what can we do? When we leave here, we can get educated. We can study founding documents, study the Constitution. It has it all in there. It was interesting. I went to law school down in Florida, and I had a constitutional law class that I attended for a year. And to tell you a little bit about my law school, I'll just say they were very liberal. It's hard to say, hard to describe it in just a couple words. But to give an example of how people are being educated when they go to law school, my constitutional law professor's first day, he said, a lot of people ask me, where I stand politically, because I tried to teach in an unbiased way. He said, I believe that President Obama is conservative. I really enjoyed his class. I was the one that raised my hand. I just looked around the room, and we're so indoctrinated every day. And I looked around the room as they're talking about abortion, things that are just so violently opposed to common sense and morality. And I look around the room, and I see my colleagues all nodding their heads. So, maybe 1 out of 90 in that class is opposing what's being indoctrinated to the students. Those aren't very good odds. These are the type of attorneys that come and represent and influence how laws are being made and sit on, as judges on the Supreme Court. We need to change the education. We need a revolution, not a revolution of arms, a revolution of thought, a revolution of morality, a revolution of community and standing up and supporting each other. As we continue to educate others, one thing to keep in mind is that the government doesn't grant rights. Rights come from God. When a right comes from God, it can't be taken away by government. And here we have the opportunity to turn our hearts back to God. As I've gotten to know the Finicums, I can't say how impressed I am with who they are. I never met LaVoy, but I've watched a lot of his videos online. And what a powerful man. And as Tara, the first Finicum I've ever met, she said to me, my father, he wasn't all about, taking the government back by force. He was always teaching, obey God. Be a good husband. Be a good father. He was teaching people good moral principles. And as Benjamin Franklin said, only a moral people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. To throw off our masters, we need morality again. Thomas Jefferson also said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Become educated. Share this message. And what God has given, let no man take away. Thank you.
Okay, so I've met one attorney I kind of like now. Garrett Smith, folks. Let him know that was nice. Spot on. Okay. By the way, just as a point of reference, it hit me as Garrett was walking through that. Since 1973, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has considered 2,652 species endangered. They've recovered 11 of them. 6 of them aren't in the United States. One of them was the American alligator, which was never endangered. They just didn't know how to count alligators. And 2 was the wolf, which they didn't recover. They just hauled them out of Canada. So my point is they have 3 or 4 success stories out of 2,600. That's what Garrett was talking about. All right, Kate. Kate Daly. Did I scare her off? Oh, there she is. Hey, Kate Daly is going to join us. Another Utahn. She's a native of St. George, Utah. I think you got some Utah fans, Kate, so that's good news. If you want to make your way up to the stage. She loves major media. She says we've had it all wrong. She's going to give us the real story. No, that's not what she's going to do. She's looking at me like, really, that look could kill. She has a couple of shows. She got fired from a show, by the way, and then went back and bought it. And now owns the show in Fox News. Kate Daly, come on up. Ladies and gentlemen, with an investigative report about what's really going on in media, please once again welcome from St. George, Utah, Kate Daly.
Of some amazing people out there. All right, I'm going to try this. Okay, here we go. Let me know if I need to do that again, okay? Hi to all of you. Can you hear me in the back? Usually my voice carries. People are always telling me to shut up. This is the first time they said get louder. All right, I'm just an opinionated girl. I'm no attorney, but I'll take a stab at this. I want to thank the Finicum family for inviting me. What an honor. We stand on hallowed ground, don't we? We're honoring a man who was the salt of the earth, to convene a meeting that never happened, an important meeting. There is no place that I would rather be today. I am a really lucky girl, and I want to tell you why. Every day I get an amazing opportunity to discuss what's really going on in America and discuss the truth for 3 solid hours a day, nationally, in cities like Chicago and Tampa, Miami, Denver, and Salt Lake. For the last 5 years, I've devoted my life to discovering the truth about our world and our government and what is really going on. I have thought seriously about changing the name of my show to I cannot believe I just said that out loud. It feels like that every day. With this new administration, I feel optimistic about free speech in the future. Had it gone the other way, not so much security in that, especially for what I do for a living. I want to talk about truth in media. I know you laugh when I say that, because it's a bit of an oxymoron, isn't it? It's kind of like government intelligence. We live in an era where the mainstream media is so embarrassed by all the lying that fake news, has resorted to calling everybody else fake news. Imagine the hypocrisy there. I used to have to convince people about the facts. I used to have to lay out the case that the media was lying. I don't have to anymore. Now it's so obvious. They're just making it really easy for me now. The American people are finally in on the con, and I'm so glad. The media is carefully controlled by 5 elite organizations. In 1983, it used to be 50. Now it's 5. And they're on the same wavelength, believe me. Have we ever had honest truth in media? I'm going to give you a 3-minute history lesson. Well, maybe 5 minutes. I want to be honest. It could be 5. 2,500 years ago, in a little tiny city named Athens, the citizens first linked free speech to this revolutionary idea that people should govern themselves. Can you imagine? They called it a democracy. They practiced this novel form of government by coming together in a physical place, a place of assembly. Then any free man could stand up, speak his mind, and propose a public policy measure. This is absolutely where politicians were born. I'm sure they camped out. In the 1500s, Gutenberg invented the printing press, and it was a marriage made in heaven. Free speech and the free press. And in 1791, the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives a special hat tip to Gutenberg, the invention of the press, and it says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of press or speech, freedom of speech or of the press. The problem was that no one realized that it could be bought. Of course, right after America became America in the 1800s, the parties rushed in to, we'll just say they wanted to defray the cost for us people. And so what they did was they subsidized the newspapers throughout the 1800s. The newspapers, well, they were all in, strings and all. Now the media does not disclose to you that the scripts are written and okayed by the powers to be. In fact, not only is it controlled, it's infiltrated. Fast forward to 1977, Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame revealed that more than 400 journalists and news executives worked for the CIA. They included journalists from the New York Times, Time Magazine, which was already bought and sold by the elite anyway, the Washington Post, and the TV networks like CBS. And a little known fact, one of the first projects of the CIA in the late 1940s, after it was formed, was to infiltrate the press, namely the Washington Post, and move people into positions of power within the media. The hope was to do so quietly infiltrate, that no one would be able to recognize the difference between the CIA and the die-hard journalists and editors. Just recently, Dr. Udo Olkoff, remember that name, an international reporter, admitted that for 25 years, the CIA wined and dined him and offered him favors, even getting him into countries that he didn't have access to, so that they could control the story that went out. And Dr. Olkoff tried to offer up the truth in his articles. His stories were shelved, changed, or downplayed. After 25 years, he had had enough and started talking about this in the press. I really wanted to have him on my show this month, but he passed away from a sudden heart attack about 3 weeks ago. None of this is theory. This is all admitted by the CIA and media organizations. In fact, we had Senate hearings back in the 70s. I have it on tape. CBS freely admits that they allowed the CIA to dictate their stories and that they held high positions within the organization. Even during World War I, reporters were rewarded and knighted for their silence and collusion. British Prime Minister David Lloyd George said if people really knew the truth, the war would be stopped tomorrow. But of course they don't know and they can't know. My friend and frequent guest on the show, John Rappaport, he's an ex-mainstream reporter. He had spoken and interviewed a reporter from a major paper and described the propaganda game in this way. So get this. This is what he said. We know what stories we can't cover. Nobody needs to prep us. Our editors know too. Otherwise, they'd never get to be our editors. Apparently, some travel was necessary, but I knew that I could turn out reams of copy without ever leaving my apartment, because I grasped the fundamental angle that I was supposed to pursue for the story. It was the first time I fully realized how easy the job of reporting could be. Assemble a list of reliable sources who would support the mandatory point of view. Walk right into a prepared group of corporate and think tank allies. Pull the copy from wire services and rewrite stories in a way that bolstered the idea that the American empire was really spreading democracy to the less fortunate. It was a walk in the park. 20 years later, I saw the same overall pattern in hundreds of major media stories, but the point of view and the mandate had changed. Now it was all about globalism. The covert op was the takedown of America in order to squash the last vestige of political freedom and integrate the nation in a new economic order, end quote. A critical thinker is going to ask these two questions. Who benefits and what's the agenda? The media is a business and it has obvious goals. Money. If it bleeds, it leads. Fear, drama, conflict. They drive the money, they make you want to watch. And they like to save time. Get this. The State Department produces what's called VNRs, video news releases. These are news clips. You've watched these on your local news broadcast. Maybe you didn't know where they were coming from. The clips are designed and approved by the State Department. The message is carefully crafted, and so is the perception of the story. VNRs these video news releases, are manipulated to show you what's going on in foreign lands. They control the text, they control what you're hearing, and all the important subtext, the attitude, the picture, and what's between the lines. The goal is to keep the masses asleep. They will keep you emotionally invested into what's happening with those Kardashians and what idiotic university students are telling you about political correctness. But they won't let you in on the erosion of your God-given inalienable rights. So the media paints a lie. And why does this protest, the protest that took place a year ago, why is it so important? Why does it matter? Just 200 years ago, 95% of our lands were farmers and ranchers. Today, it's 1.6%. 1.6. We are losing America's finest. We are losing our ranchers and farmers. They are disappearing because of endless agencies in control, regulations, costs, fees, fines, and often bullied off their property, or they just give up because they can't fight it anymore. This is what's happening on the West. Let me tell you what's happening on the East. Many of you don't know this, maybe. I'm not sure. But on the East Coast, thanks to the Conservation Act, farmers who cannot afford to pay their taxes on their ranches are being coaxed by the feds to turn over their property to the government in lieu of taxes. What they're promised is that the land will stay in their family forever. They even give them a handsome little placard, a little sign with their family name that says the Smith family owns this farm, but they've given it to the Conservation Act. They do get to tell them what they're going to grow. But I want you to listen to what's in the fine print. At the bottom of the contract, it says that they sign over their property to the United States and its successor. Did you know we have a successor? Why is this such a big deal? Why are the feds grabbing up land? Property rights separate us, the American people, from third world countries. The right to own property is at the very root of being an American. Land ownership creates wealth, and it takes people out of slavery. That's how we were able to do it in just 240 years, right? So how has the government manipulated the people into grabbing up over 600 million acres of land that they have no right to control when the amount that they're supposed to own is really dictated in the Constitution? In the mid-30s, groups like the Wilderness Society cropped up. Small groups that they were working quietly with the government to usurp property, to hand it over for government control, but under the guise of protecting it from us, the humans. Did you know we were the enemy? I don't remember a trial, but we are. We are the enemy to land. At the time, in the 30s and 40s, they were afraid of the coming automobile boom, so they decided, in their own words, to battle uncompromisingly, that was their words, to get land in the hands of the feds. With the creation of the BLM and all the federal agencies that are managing it, to the peril of the ranchers and farmers, land is taken from the public to protect a flower, a frog, a weed, a flea that dwells on the frog, that dwells on a flower, that dwells on a weed patch. And in our case, in southern Utah, we got the not native to Utah turtle, the desert tortoise. We even pay for Turtle Watch. Do you want to know what Turtle Watch is? Turtle Watch is when we, the taxpayer, pay the police to sit in their cars as policemen to make sure that the turtles don't cross the road and get smashed. Government intelligence, that's what that is. And in Nevada, so many were being saved, they started euthanizing them, killing them. Like I said, government intelligence. When the desert tortoise was listed as threatened in 1990 in Nevada, the Nature Conservancy and the Conservation Fund worked with the county. bought out 16 BLM grazing permits from local ranchers over a decade. It just left one stockman with a significant herd of cattle in the area, Clive and Bundy. The last rancher standing. The despicable Harry Reid, oh, I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? The despicable Harry Reid started describing the last rancher standing as a domestic terrorist. A rancher as a domestic terrorist. Have you met a rancher? That's why that's so baffling. Harry Reid doesn't mind selling out his own fellow citizen. I don't know if you've thought about this, but Harry, the senator, has never had a problem with the feds owning 80% of his own state. He never fought it, and the last time I checked, people don't fly into Vegas to go hiking in Nevada federally protected wilderness. Why does Harry Reid care if the ranchers have their lands or not? Why is he so threatened by someone fighting for their cattle grazing rights? Or is there a motivation there? What partnerships and deals are taking place with foreign countries for control of our lands through politicians? If you're a good journalist, go write about that. Amen. The issue is so important to the government that they are crafting the mainstream media to turn patriots into terrorists. They seek to discredit anyone who stands up for their property rights. They will turn the nation against you. They will imprison you. They will kill you. Why? Because the government has to control the land. You control the land, you control the people. The very minute the protest started, articles appeared on the internet with the following buzzwords, all ready to go to the AP. Armed men, led by militia Bundy brothers, take over federal building in rural Oregon. First headline, town warily watches as militia takes refuge. Feds are on the scene to keep us safe. From the right-wing armed men. Every single publication in mainstream media regurgitated the exact viewpoint, the same exact sentence, the same exact lie. Ask yourself why or how did every single mainstream media get the same exact story? How does that happen? The men that came to Oregon were seeking to bring attention to the American people that their own federal lands were being grabbed. And the incarceration, unlawful incarceration of the Hammonds. But the people never heard about this. They weren't acting in a threatening way. They just wanted to speak. They just wanted to talk. They wanted the media to print the truth. So for all you reporters out there, here's some truth. Not one reporter in mainstream media checked its facts. Ammon and Ryan Bundy and LaVoy Finicum were not now, nor never, nor ever part of a militia. It was a lie to make them look threatening. One simple check by a curious reporter would have exposed this, but the narrative had already been laid out. Every article written said they were militant or part of a militia, and that they would only use the word standoff. Maybe reporters aren't aware that it takes two to have a standoff, because the only ones in the standoff were the feds. So why check the facts? After all, these are just a bunch of ranchers with guns, right? Forget that each one of them have a concealed permit to carry, that pesky old little Second Amendment right. Let's just paint them as armed militant leaders, ready to shoot everyone in sight. If you say the ranchers who alcohol carry permits, then that's not a very good story. Just to give you an idea, comparatively, when Occupy Wall Street came about in 2011, it had violence, attacks, arrests, and people trashed public property and private property for months on end. And President Obama came out and said he sympathized with them and that they needed a voice. In Oregon, the protests had to be shut down so quickly because people, they just didn't want us to ask questions. So you have a sheriff who takes his marching orders from the feds and refuses to stand up for property rights of the Hammonds. Even though Occupy Wall Street went on for months, the feds decided they wouldn't let this go on for more than 3 weeks. There was no need for the feds to come in to handle things, but they were all dressed up in their layers of combat gear, maybe excited for another Ruby Ridge. Oh, did I say that out loud? The protesters were not threatening. The feds had to make it look like they were a real threat to the people. This was easy to see if you were paying attention. The protesters said again and again they were there to talk and educate and bring attention to what was going on. Not a single bullet was fired. LaVoy said he could feel the FBI creating the threat, ramping up the intensity, acting differently towards them. This was a show by the feds, and on January 26th, it was no traffic stop, it was an ambush. They had staged a blind man's curve with an abrupt stop so he couldn't slow down. They were ready and waiting for LaVoy in the trees as he was trying to flee to a constitutional sheriff for protection. He got out of the truck with his hands up to draw attention away from those in the vehicle for safety reasons. His hands were in the air. He was shot from behind, in the back. We all see the grainy footage that they tried to pass off as 2017 technology. But even then, it's hard to conceal the truth. He was murdered within minutes. The agents never even tried to speak with him or de-escalate the situation. Nothing. He did not shoot at the agents. He was not a threat in any way. It's obviously a problem, the mainstream media and the spin. They invent the news, and those gullible enough to believe them, I get it. This is an issue. But I'd like to tell you what I think the real problem is. I rode a friend's mule in the funeral procession at LaVoy's funeral. It was a humbling, incredible experience. And as we rode, the topic of my profession came up. I told him the danger I face is that I could never love my job too much. And he looked at me like I was crazy. I said, I can't love my job too much because I could possibly be swayed from telling the truth to please somebody. Climbing the career ladder could become too important and could challenge the integrity of the job that I do. Easily, since it depends on advertisers who think you're going to be unnerved if you hear the truth. I don't care what any of you do for a living. Every single one of us are citizens of this land first. Your job is just your vehicle to make money while you are here. It should never dictate who you become. But it takes many of us average citizens to carry out the will of those that seek to destroy our freedom. They cannot do it without you. It's willing participants. So I say this. To the policeman who violates the Fourth Amendment because he wants to get the arrest for the promotion, to the journalist who decides that one article of lies won't matter because they need a paycheck, to the judge who says the Constitution is not allowed in the courtroom because it may interfere with the pre-designated verdict. To the informants that agreed to sell out their fellow man for a couple of bucks. The one thing to figure out there is that if they need to use you to trick somebody into getting somebody, maybe it's not worth the get. To the feds seated in the audience today that are trying to conceal themselves as ranchers. Maybe you're just looking for something to report to your superiors, or maybe you think you're protecting us, but look around you, who do you see? People that love America, ranchers and farmers. What are they going to do, farm us to death? Here's the rub. I actually trust you more. You, the ranchers and farmers.
Damn straight.
I would flee to you for safety any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Hell yeah.
They look at me like a fellow citizen, right? And not a pawn in a game of ambition. To the elected officials that take the lobbyist money and tell themselves that they have to play the game until they get a little more powerful, maybe 5 terms from now. To the U.S. Marshal who thinks he's got the power of God and can throw a shackled man down a stairwell because he feels like it. To the prosecuting attorney that only cares about the win and not the truth. To the prison guards who deny food to the incarcerated. To the BLM worker who cuts off water to ranchers' property because he wants to work into the next power position within the agency. To all of you who may be involved in the infringing of another's rights and told it is for the greater good, there is no good that comes from selling out your fellow man. All of us are possible cogs in the wheel of a tyrannical system designed to take our freedom. The America we have right now is the America that we created. We no longer want a judicial system where Hillary goes free and patriots are incarcerated because they love freedom. I actually said this on the air too, but I told my children that in America today, if they ever aspired to be a federal district court judge, a state DA, or a U.S. Marshal, they might as well aspire to be in the mafia. Have you played a part in supporting, aiding, or abetting in this? Do you realize that you're digging your own grave too? Maybe you tell yourself that just a few acts against your fellow man couldn't possibly amount to anything. I mean, after all, who would know, right? There is a word used in the preamble of the Constitution 3 different times. Without this single word, we would have never had an America. The word is united. We had to have something that united us as a country in order to band together to leave British rule. We Americans may not agree on much, and that's okay, but we were united in our core principles of freedom. Without unity in that, the constitutional government simply can't work. We established justice, providing for the common defense, and rules to keep the government limited. We did all that together, despite how different we are. We have a choice now, just as we did then. We can be united in our slavery, or we can be united in our liberty, but we have to stand together. Even you citizens with a little bit of power over the other, you are not exempt from this. This is exactly what happened to John Stockwell. He was a CIA agent that came out in the 1980s. CIA was carrying out major atrocities against people. He went to the higher-ups, and they told him that he would understand what they were doing, or what he was forced to do, that he would understand someday. He did it, he trusted, and when he finally got to the top of the CIA ladder, he realized that there was no understanding of the heinous acts they were doing. It was all smoke and mirrors, designed to keep a good little soldier doing what they wanted him to do as they violated human rights and orchestrated coups in Central and South America to benefit the elite. How many go along with blind trust, knowing what they're doing is wrong? LaVoy Finicum said, some things are worth more than your life, and I believe freedom is one of them. If we don't have the First Amendment, we have nothing. If we can't protect it using the Second Amendment, we have nothing. And to all of those in law enforcement here today, I'm not discrediting you. You're there for a role. You have a role in this country, and I'm glad that you're there to put your life on the line to get the bad guy. But along the way, you're going to have to ask yourself, really, who is the bad guy? There is a role for good government. We need limited government that knows its bounds of authority, and those that are wise enough to stand or to understand limited government and the law. We appreciate you. I say to anyone who can exercise power over another, with that power comes great responsibility to your fellow man. The citizens' rights that you violate today will have an impact on your own freedom down the road. You are a cog in the wheel. The country you grumble about, the anger you feel, and we've allowed to have happen over 241 years, we have contributed to this as citizens by doing these things. In my line of work, he who tells the story creates the winners and the losers. The media has the power to make a nation of 330 million people either loathe you or love you. Just ask Trump. That's a lot of power. Case in point, framing the story to make those protesters look dangerous dominated the media. The not guilty verdict was the most amazing story of the century given the bought-off courts. Because when you spend millions of taxpayer dollars and have no case, that's a little embarrassing. To the media present, use this power responsibly. Instead of creating the story to invoke an agenda, how about telling the story as is and letting the audience decide? Telling the truth is not hard. It's very simple. You sleep better at night. There's just all kinds of bonuses. The media is only supposed to relay the information, not invent it. And if you cannot tell the truth, leave the job. If enough of you refuse to deliver the propaganda, the media will fall and be forced to reinvent itself. Like every industry that loses its compass and screws those that it serves, it has to reach rock bottom. Let it walk away. There are other jobs. Stand for something bigger than yourself. Choose your integrity over your ambition. We all won that Revolutionary War. We all get the gift of living in this free republic. You will either contribute to its success or we all lose it together. You can convince yourself that you can sell out a few times, and when you get more power in the future, you're just going to do the right thing, right? I know elected officials that feel that way. I can promise you this, after you have sold out again and again on your way up, you will not care about doing the right thing once you get there. It takes a whole lot of people just doing their jobs to create a nation that fears its government. The Nazis' only defense was that they were just doing what they were told. Are we going to learn from history that this is no excuse to abuse a fellow citizen? Are you just doing your job? The guys waiting in the trees for LaVoy, were they just doing what they were told to do? They could have made a choice. God gave every single one of us a brain and a conscience. What every citizen does matters when you're doing it to another citizen. I don't care how powerful you think you are at the end of the day. We are all human beings. We all get buried 6 feet deep, and we are not buried with our power. We're buried with our principles. That's what we're buried with. We must face our dependency to security head on. We have to be willing to walk away from it all, the very comfortable lives that we lead. We need citizens to wake up and pray to God again. We need politicians to actually read the bills. We need scientists who won't take a payoff for an opinion, and talking heads that refuse to read that script. Look around you. Who's here? ranchers, farmers, Constitution-loving patriots, average citizens who love America. There is no violence here. There's only a will to change the hearts and minds of men and women in this country through education and an understanding of God-given right. If you want to fear someone, or you want to fear a movement, fear those seeking to undermine your rights that reside in the highest positions of power in this country. Fear those that conspire to keeping the masses asleep. Fear those that seek to imprison patriot-loving Americans to cover up insidious wrongdoing and illegal activity. It is not you versus me. It is freedom versus slavery, and it always has been. That time for choosing is now. I end every single show with the phrase, be faithful, be fearless. Because to be fearless, you start with a little bit of faith. And that enables you to have that kind of fearless mentality to go out in the world and speak louder and do more. On my Fox News jacket, I have a piece of the tarp that belonged to LaVoy. It's there to remind me to speak loudly, to do what I know is right. And what gives me hope are all of you. There are so many good Americans. There are so many good people in this world. What did LaVoy stand for? He stood for everything that is important. He gave his life for that stand. He knew just how important our property rights are to the core of being an American. He was trying to deliver that message to all of you right here in John Day a year ago. God bless him for trying. God bless our country if we are smart enough to keep it. LaVoy said it best. It doesn't matter how it ends. It matters how you stand.
Kate Dowley, ladies and gentlemen. Kate, thank you. I have no earthly idea why you got fired. All right, just so that you know a little housekeeping, we're going to have one more presentation and then we've got a break. During that break, we'll have the fundraisers. By the way, the fundraiser is the 7th and 8th grade class back in the corner with selling your refreshments. That's a 7th and 8th grade class in John Day. Their money is going to pay for a trip to Washington, D.C. They plan to meet the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And present a letter to him that says, "Free the Hams." Bill Norton is up next, and for all of you parents who have that unruly teenager and you wonder, how in the world am I ever going to fix this? Here's proof. You can fix this. This guy was a rebellion as a 16-year-old. Quit school. He was just going to be a troublemaker the rest of his life. And then somehow he figured out that he needed to be a better student himself, only he didn't go to the public school system to learn. He started learning on his own. He started to learn what self-governance actually meant. Has now authored several books and is about to show you what self-governance is all about. You making the difference, ladies and gentlemen. Bill Norton.
All right, this is fantastic, isn't it? So, one thing that I observed right away as I was talking to Tara and Jeanette about this event was how important it was to them that this event be about education. That it not be any kind of a poor me event. Look at, we've been, big tragedies and things. It's about education, which is really what I believe LaVoy really wanted to see was was fellow citizens becoming educated on the principles of freedom. So that's a little bit of what I'm going to do today. In fact, Thomas Jefferson said that the only true corrective of constitutional abuses is education. So that's why I'm glad that that's what we're doing here this evening, is educating each other and becoming more aware. Now, my specialty is the principles of liberty. And I like to go right down to the most fundamental level that I can possibly get. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to get so fundamental, just right down to the very core, that a lot of it is going to already ring true to you. Whether you've heard this or not, it's going to ring true to you, especially those of you who till the ground and use the earth and produce things. Really ring true to you. Now, by show of hands, how many of you have been to Boston? Hey, that's not too bad. I wasn't expecting quite that many. You guys are not too keen on the big city, I'm sure, right? Now, I come from Gilbert, Arizona, which is a suburb of the Phoenix area. I've got some Arizona folks. Now, can I just tell you, it is really, really cold here. But nonetheless, I give you greetings from warm Arizona. Now, so those of you who have been to Boston, if you went to Boston, I hope you took the Freedom Trail. Now, those of you who have never been to Boston, there's a red painted line, or inlaid bricks in some areas, all through Old Town Boston, where you can just follow this line, and it's this self-guided tour through what they call the Freedom Trail. And it's all these great historical sites. In fact, if you start at one end of the Freedom Trail, you'll begin at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was actually on Breed's Hill. The Battle of Bunker Hill, you'll see it, the monuments and things there, and then you go down and you'll cross the bridge, and then one of the next sites that you'll come to is the Old North Church, the famous church where the two lanterns hung, indicating that the British would be leaving by water rather than by land. And then you go a little bit further, and there's a number of cemeteries and things along the way, and you'll come to the old Granary Cemetery. And it's a pretty neat place, because you'll see a number of the founders there. Well, you won't see them. You'll see their gravestones. And when you first go in, you take a right, and there's Samuel Adams, father of the American Revolution. And then there you'll also see Paul Revere, and John Hancock is there. Benjamin Franklin's parents are buried there. The largest stone in the whole place is for Benjamin Franklin's parents. Because you see, Benjamin Franklin was born just about right across the street and baptized just right down the road at the Old South Church. Now, the Old South Church is there on the Freedom Trail. Now, during the colonial times, the Old South Church was the tallest and largest building in all of Boston. Now it sits quietly nestled among the towering skyscrapers of busy urban life. But in 1746, during what came to be known as King George's War, it was the tallest building in Boston. Now, during King George's War, the colonists had gotten word that the French were coming to burn the coastal cities of America. And so the colonists were quite concerned, because they didn't have the cannons and the guns and the armaments and things that they needed in order to fight off 100 ships that were coming to burn the coastal cities of America. So they turned to the only weapon they had, a weapon that they had to turn to quite often. The governor of Massachusetts declared a universal day of fasting and prayer. And on the appointed day, the colonists gathered together there at the Old South Church, those who were in the Boston area. And it was crowded, standing room only, people looking through the windows, and it was Reverend Thomas Prince's turn to officiate at that high pulpit in the Old South Church. And he began to pray, prayed before thousands. And he said, "O God, we ask thee to raise thy right hand and scatter the ships of our tormentors, or drive them hence. Sink those proud frigates to the bottom of thy deep," he said. And he went on to pray like this for quite some time, until all of a sudden, the room began to darken. And the shutters began to violently slam against the wall. The bell atop the tower of the old church began to ring erratically. Reverend Prince paused, and he bowed his head. And a moment later, he looked up, raised his hands high above his head, tears streaming down his face. "O God, we hear thee. We hear thy voice, O Lord, we hear it. Thy breath is upon the waters from the eastward. Thy bell tolls for the death of our enemies." Now, how did he know what was going on? He didn't have a cell phone. Okay, yeah, the ships are going down, huh? He just felt like God was answering their prayers. And sure enough, about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, the news came that a virtual hurricane had risen out of the Atlantic and had sunken almost every one of those 100 ships. And those that remained limped back to the West Indies from whence they came. So Boston wasn't burned, Charleston wasn't burned, New York wasn't burned. God had once again preserved the colonists from utter destruction. Now I tell you that story that took place at the Old South Church along the Freedom Trail in Boston, because I want you to think about what we're doing here tonight as part of a new freedom trail that we're blazing. Now, over the last almost 10 years now, there has been a liberty movement on the rise in America. And it's this new freedom trail that's being blazed. And what we are doing right now, I hope, 200 years from now, our children, our posterity, are actually going to various sites that were significant in this freedom trail. I hope that one of those sites 200 years from now is on Highway 395. A memorial there and a memorial other places for patriots that sacrificed for our freedom and liberty, just like the founders did. Now, so let's go into the founders and let's really look at what they discovered, learned, and instituted, and why. Right down to these fundamentals. So, of course, you're familiar with Declaration of Independence, I would hope. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which connect them to another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. Don't you love that phrase, laws of nature and nature's God? I love how Jefferson does this, because it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or don't believe in God. Laws of nature, they're real, they're identifiable, they're observable, and so at least believe and understand these laws of nature exist. And oh, by the way, I personally, Jefferson speaking, believe that it's God's laws with the laws of nature. But again, it doesn't matter. We can get along with our atheist friends so long as those atheist friends recognize that there are natural law principles. So we can still live together. And so I love that phrase that Jefferson's got there. And then he goes on. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Amazing stuff. Now, I've referred to Jefferson a few times here. A friend of mine and I who have studied this kind of stuff together, we've realized that we need to stop using Jefferson as the author for the Declaration of Independence, because though he penned the draft, it went through debate in Congress, and Congress ultimately passed it. So it's Congress's document. Now, the reason why we think that's important is because there's a movement out there, has been out there for 30 years, to discredit Jefferson. Right? Slaveholder, fathering slave children, all these other kinds of things that they claim. And so they want to discredit the single man, whereas we can refer to the document as a document that was written and passed by a large group of people, not just a single individual. Now, we have had about 180-year history in America prior to the Constitution. We forget about that, don't we? Well, this 180-year period was a period of trial and error. Now, we started learning right from the very start. In fact, Jamestown. What were they using to plow their fields with in Jamestown? They were using a stick plow. Right? Pretty much the same way that people were plowing their fields for about 5,000 years. Oh, they had improved upon it a little bit. They put a little metal tip on the end so it didn't wear down quite as much. But basically the way that mankind had been plowing their fields for 5,000 years. Their transportation, wind power for ships, animal power, same way for 5,000 years. Their medicines were made up more of noxious concoctions and superstition than any kind of science. They thought alcohol was a staple food. Some still think that. But what happened once we wrote that Declaration of Independence and wrote the Constitution and implemented the Constitution? We went from ox cart to space travel in less than 200 years. We went further in 200 years than mankind had gone in the 5,000 years previous. You can even say that we've made a 5,000-year leap. Many of you are probably familiar with that book, The 5,000-Year Leap, right? Now I'm going to bring up some organizations and some materials and books and things periodically as I speak with you as places that you can go to learn some of these fundamental principles, because it's critical that we learn them. Folks, we need to understand something. It is not natural, it is not instinctive for us to live together in a peaceful way. It requires, as Thomas Jefferson said, it requires habit and long training to be able to live together. And so it's important that we teach ourselves these fundamental principles and we read and reread materials that would teach us this. So let's get into some of these principles that were outlined in the Declaration of Independence drafted by Jefferson. First of all, there are certain self-evident truths. He said that when he was writing the document, he wanted to present truths that ascended, that commanded assent, he said. So these are truths that are so correct that they don't need anything backing them up. They command assent. They rise up on their own. And that's exactly what he was looking for. A couple of these truths are that there are natural law principles, and that those are fundamental truths. He also said that we are created equal. Now this is interesting. If you kind of look around the room, you'll discover very quickly that we don't seem very equal, do we? We come in all different shapes and sizes, and we have different talents and abilities, and our outcome is very different, income levels and things like that. So how are we the same or equal? We're only equal in two ways. Three, actually. We're equal in the sight of God, but we can't change or alter that. So I'm just going to focus on two ways. We're equal, first of all, in our rights, and we're equal under the law. Right? Natural law treats us all equally. Gravity treats us all the exact same, right? Now, if we recognize that and we establish a form of government in which we want everybody's rights to be protected equally, then we can live in a pretty cool society. So here's two individuals. One has $20, the other one has $10, and we recognize property rights, and so we treat them equally, and so we protect that property. That's how things went for our country for quite some time. And then we start talking about how, this is getting old-fashioned, this business. This is so unfair that somebody has $20 and another person has $10. We are civilized enough that we can understand how to equalize everybody. So right now, we protect those rights, and we decide that we want to change this. We want to equalize everybody, so we're all equal in things, not just equal in our rights. So the $20 individual gives $5, forced to give $5 to the $10 individual through law, and now they're equal in things. Isn't this fantastic? Well, the problem with that is that this individual is no longer protecting. In fact, in trying to make us equal in things, which nature clearly has not made us equal in things, right? But when we try to go against nature and make us equal in things, it automatically makes us unequal in the ways that nature did intend us to be equal. So, for example, we are now unequal in the protection under the law. We are unequal now in our rights, because that gentleman there is unprotected, and he has lost rights. The other individual has gained things. Now, the green individual there, has he lost his rights? He has. He might not think he has because he gained things. But what happens if this law is still on the books that says we need to all have the same things? What happens if that law is still on the books and a third gentleman appears? All of a sudden, we've got to continue to redistribute. So he lost his rights. When did he lose his rights? He lost his rights the moment he let that law be passed and let that money be transferred to him. Folks, this is such an important principle in America because so often we look at our neighbors getting gored by laws and we think, that's not affecting us, no big deal. In fact, that's my competition, so this is awesome because now I have an advantage over him. But in allowing a law that takes away our neighbor's rights, we are now we're consenting to allow our rights to be lost. So an important principle. In fact, this idea, this concept makes me realize why the good book tells us that we should lose ourselves in the service of others if we want to find ourselves. Because if we lose ourselves in the protection of the rights of our neighbors, in the end, we will actually find our own rights protected. If you just stay real selfish and protect your own rights, and you don't care about anybody else's, that's one person protecting your rights. If you focus on protecting all of your neighbor's rights, and they focus on protecting their neighbor's rights, we now have 315 million people protecting your rights. So, very important we recognize that we need to protect the rights of our neighbors. So then Jefferson talked about unalienable rights. And he talked about how we have certain unalienable rights, and he narrows them down, of course, to life, liberty, and property. But here's an unalienable right. Do we have the unalienable right to move from point A to point B? Do we have that unalienable right? Sure we do. How do we know? Because God gave us legs. We can do it. But do we have the right to take any path that we want from point A to point B? We do not. Because we may run into somebody else and infringe upon their rights. We might have to cross their property, whatever. There are certain rights that take precedence over others, and property rights takes precedence over the right to move. So we don't have the right. Now, it wouldn't make any sense at all for us in society to sit there and negotiate all of our own paths to work and to the store and to school and all that kind of stuff because our roads would look just crazy like this. This is how the roads back east look. Of course, out west, we started getting smart, and we get these nice grids and things. So what we do, instead of negotiating paths, our own paths with our neighbors, we get together and we buy up some property. And we pave that property and put some lines on it. And we say anybody can jump on this road as long as they take a little test and get a driver's license. So that we all know that we understand the laws of the road. Now, once you get on that road, can you go just as fast and furious as you want to with your rights? You can. Until what? Come to an intersection. Now, what we want to do is we want to avoid an accident. Okay? And so government is formed specifically to govern the intersection of rights, because that's what we do. In order to keep an accident from happening, we put up a stop sign or lights or whatever. We govern it. So government's purpose is to govern the intersection of rights. Now, once you get to that intersection, you might have to yield your rights from time to time. But do you ever lose them? No. You yield so that somebody else can go by with their rights. Then once they go by, you can now continue on with your rights. Simply to govern the intersection of rights so that we don't get in an accident and start getting in trouble. Now let's see just how far we can go with government and what we can kind of delegate. Do you have the right to sit at your doorstep with a garden hose just in case your home starts on fire, you can put it out? Absolutely, you've got that right. Definitely. Do you have the right to sit at your doorstep with a gun in your other hand just in case somebody comes in to rob or assault you, you can protect yourselves? Absolutely, you have that right. Do you want to do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Not necessarily. Although I was teaching a seminar once in Asheville, North Carolina. Small little town out in the middle of nowhere, and there's a rough character out back. And when I said, "Do you want to sit on your doorstep 24/7 with a gun in your hand?" He said, "I do." Sure enough, he does. He sits there with the shotgun in his hand from time to time just so his neighbors know who's in charge of his property. But most of us don't want to sit there 24/7. So instead, we get a hold of Fred, and we say, "Fred, we want to give you a job. We're going to give you some a big coat and some big boots and a hat and a shiny red truck. And when the phone rings, you got to come running. Make sure there's water in that truck because our home's on fire. We want you to put it out. Can you do that?" Fred said, "Absolutely." Then we get a hold of Sam. "Sam, we want to give you a job. Can you drive around our neighborhoods and just kind of keep an eye on our property, make sure nobody's stealing it, make sure nobody's assaulting our family and things? Can you do that?" Sam said, "Absolutely." And then, so what have we just created there? A police and fire department. We just created government. And what gave us the right to create that government? What gave us the right to create that government was the fact that we had the right in the first place to sit at our doorstep with a garden hose and a gun. Right? So, we are able to delegate our rights to our agents, the government. So let's see just how far we can delegate this. This is my neighborhood here, and I'm right there in the center home. I've got 4 kids. My wife, 4 kids, we've got 1 car. It's a humble living, but we make do. And then you have over here, you've got the Smiths. The Smiths, husband and wife, no kids, 2 cars. Then you've got the Joneses. Husband and wife, 6 kids, no car. That's a pretty rough life. That's pretty tough for them to figure out how to get the kids to school, get to work, things like that. Now, I'm a kind, compassionate, merciful individual, so I decide that I want to help out the Joneses. And so I get a hold of the Joneses and say, "Hey," I go over to Mr. Smith rather, and I say, "Hey, Mr. Smith, I got this idea. Why don't you give one of your cars to the Joneses?" He said, "Well, that's an idea, all right." I said, "Well, it's more than an idea. I insist." "You insist? Get out of here. I'm not going to just give my car to the Joneses." Now, this infuriates me because I'm a kind, compassionate, merciful individual, and I can't believe how much of a lack of compassion Mr. Smith has. So I go home. I can't even sleep at night. I'm just restless, and so finally, I know a thing or two about cars. So I get up in the middle of the night, and I hotwire that car, and I bring it over to the Joneses. Knock on the door, wake up Mr. Jones, and I show him this new, "For me, really? Yeah, this is for you. Now you can get your kids to school. You could get to work a lot easier. Sorry I don't have a key, but if you just touch these 2 wires together, you'll do just fine." Now I go home and I sleep like a baby because I'm a kind, compassionate, merciful individual. All of a sudden, 3 o'clock in the morning, a knock on the door. It's the sheriff. "Your fingerprints are all over that car." Well, of course they are. You'd have done the same thing if you were as kind, compassionate, and merciful as I am, right? And so he didn't want to hear any of that, and so he hauls me off to jail. So I ended up doing 5-6 years, and I had a lot of time to think. Now, talking to my wife, I understood that the situation was still the same the whole time I'm in jail. The Joneses have no car. The Smiths, those just ungrateful, uncompassionate Smiths still got the 2 cars. So I get out of jail, and I had a lot of time to think about a good plan. So I get them together, and I end up getting all my neighbors together, and I say, "Hey, let's vote on this." So there's 100 homes in our neighborhood, and each home gets 1 vote. Let's vote on whether or not Mr. Smith has to give his car to Mr. Jones. I'm a pretty good campaigner, so the results come out. 99 for and 1 against. The 1 against, of course, Mr. Lack of Compassion. Okay? So, but that's a mandate. Isn't that a mandate? You got to voice of the people. You got to listen to the people. So we take that car and we bring it over to the Joneses. Now, if this was to happen to you in your own neighborhood, if you did this in your own neighborhood, what happens next? 99 people go to jail. Right? Because do you have the right to take from one neighbor, as an individual, take from one neighbor and give to another neighbor? No. Do you? Yeah. Do you have the right to somehow magically get the right collectively when you get together? Do you collectively have the right to take from one neighbor and give to the other? No. If we're to operate under the premise that the United States is based on laws delegated by the people, then we cannot delegate rights or authority that we ourselves do not have. If we do not have the ability to take from a neighbor and give to another neighbor, we cannot delegate that authority to our agents, the government. We can only delegate that which we can do. So, of course, this is unjust. Now, the problem is we do it all the time, don't we? And folks, all of us are guilty of it sometime, somewhere. We support some kind of law that we really don't have the authority to tell our neighbor that they can and can't do whatever it is that we're making against the law. And so that's what ends up happening. We go to Congress or state legislatures or whatever, and we haven't passed the law. What's worse, we then take our agents, the government, the ones that are supposed to be protecting our rights, and we give them the charge of abusing those rights. And it's completely immoral, and it's absolutely unjust. So we've got to understand this concept of the delegation of rights. We can only delegate that which we have the right ourselves to do. Now, what's the only way that we can justly get that vehicle from Mr. Smith over to Mr. Jones? He buys it. What if Mr. Jones offers him $1 million for that car? Does he have to sell it? No. No, there's only one way that we can get that car from Mr. Smith over to Mr. Jones, and that's if Mr. Smith consents to it. His consent. So what is it that binds him to that property so tightly that he's the only one that can consent to giving that car? He's the only one that can consent whether he gives it or not. Or he can take it and he can throw it away or get rid of it. He can sell it. He can crush it up into a little square and put it on Mr. Jones's doorstep. The cruel joke. It's all up to Mr. Smith. So what is it that binds to it? Now we're going to go down the thinking here of John Locke, great philosopher. Now John Locke said, he's thinking, okay, when does something become your property? And he determines that something becomes your property. He's kind of walking through this and he's thinking, all right, if there's a wild apple tree out in the middle of the wilderness and you go and you pick one of those apples, at what point does it become yours? If you gather it all up and you put it in a bushel and you bring it home and you eat that apple and you make apple pie and apple dumplings and apple jacks and whatever else you make out of apples. Now once you eat that apple and you chew it up, you're digesting it. You swallow it. It's going into your stomach. Acids and things are going to continue to break it down and digest it. Then it's going to go into your intestines where your body is going to start absorbing the nutrients. Now we're going to stop right there in the digestive process. John Locke then asked the question, at this stage, whose nutrients is it? Well, it's very clear that it's their nutrients. So he's thinking, all right, at what point did it become theirs? When he ate it? No, because that would mean from the picking to the eating, he was stealing it. So it must be the first. He said if the first action didn't make it his, nothing else could. So it's the picking. So what is it about the picking he's thinking? It's because he added something of himself to nature. He took his labor and added something to it. Consider this equation here. He took his time and his choices, and he ended up purchasing his property with those time and choices. Now, time and choices are actually our life and our liberty. So when you purchase property, you don't purchase property with money. You purchase property with your life and your liberty. You spend your life, you spend your liberty, and what you obtain is your property. Now, if you make $60,000 a year and you purchase a car for $30,000 and somebody steals it, what if they also stole it? Remember your algebra teachers taught you that if you take from one side of the equal sign, you have to take from the other side as well? So if you get that property stolen, they have not just stolen a material possession. They have stolen part of your life and liberty. In this case, 6 months of your life and the liberty that you used to obtain that car. They've taken it. You never get that car back. You will never get that life and liberty back. Life and liberty is inseparably connected to your property and vice versa. This is why property is bound to you so tightly. Now, any idea what the value of life is? You know, you got all these politicians and things, and they're spending all kinds of tax dollars and all that. The value of life, I can put a price on life. Everybody says, oh, there's, not a price on life. I can put an exact price on life. It's $1.2 million. You're thinking, where in the world? I don't see a price tag. $1.2 million is the average amount of money that the average person will make in a lifetime. So for every $1.2 million that government spends tax dollars, they are spending a life, because it takes a life to generate that $1.2 million. So life plus liberty equals property. So under this definition, what else is our property? Of course, our car and our home and those things and our clothing. What about our education? Is that our property? We spend life and liberty for that? What about our relationships? Yeah, those of us that are married know we spend an awful lot of our life and liberty on that relationship, right? Now, men, I didn't just say women are your property. The relationship is your property, right? Sacrificing. And whenever relationships fails because one or both individuals are no longer willing to sacrifice their life and liberty for the other individual. Right? What about your the good things that you do in your community and your good deeds? Sure, you're spending life and liberty on that. That is your property. What about the bad things you do? You've heard the phrase, owning your sins. You better believe it. You bought them. You spent your life and liberty on those sins. Now, I believe sin is something that you are wasting. See, God doesn't like waste. So when you purchase things with your life and liberty that have no value or negative value, you have just wasted your life and liberty. In fact, you can determine exactly the value that you place on your life and liberty by the property that you are purchasing with your life and liberty. And you wished I didn't just say that, right? Because now you're reflecting upon some of the stupid things you did in your teenage years. And think, boy, I didn't have much of an opinion of my life and liberty at the time. But you can totally determine how the value you place. Now, when we purchase something of no value, idleness, things like that, or negative value would mean that you're not only using up your life and liberty, but you're also using somebody else's life and liberty to purchase what you want. Stealing, theft, fraud, all those kind of things. Now, if what you do wrong is your life and is your property, what about asking for forgiveness and using your life and liberty to try to make amends? Forgiveness, repentance, is that your property? Salvation, is that your property? Absolutely. We spend our life and liberty working toward that. Now, the reason why I bring it all the way to salvation is because Thomas Jefferson said, the ultimate form of happiness would be to return to that God that made us. Life plus liberty equals the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of things of real value, not things to put a smile on your face, property of real value. Now, this brings us right down to exactly why property is connected to our life and liberty. Who gives us life? God does. Who's the only one that can take life away? God is. Now, this is a fundamental principle, a natural law principle. The power to create is the power to destroy. In fact, you remember your mothers when you were frustrating her, teenagers, whatever. Remember your mothers when she said, I brought you into this world. I got the power to take you out. You didn't realize your mother was teaching you a natural law principle during that heated exchange, did you? Who gives us our liberty? God gives us our liberty, and it's governed by natural law. Who can take liberty? Only God, or the violation of natural law. Who gives us our property? Based on the equation, life plus liberty equals property. We do. God might make the resources available, but we produce and create our property. So who's the only one that can take that property away? We are. It is part of us. John Locke said that anything we do with this property is an extension of this property, and therefore we have a right to govern it just like we have a right to govern this. Now, the great thing here about property is it tells us exactly where we are with our freedom. Many of you have probably seen a political spectrum like this. But if we do not have the total right and control of our property because of too much government regulation, too much taxation, things like that, then we know that we are too close toward tyranny. If we don't have the total right and control of our property because of theft, fraud, things like that, we know we're too far toward anarchy. It's when we have the total right and control of our property that we know that we have found that balanced center of freedom and liberty, that balanced center between tyranny and anarchy. So property becomes the gauge to determine where we are with our liberty. How are we doing right now in our country? We're kind of all over this scale, right? Not in the very middle. Now, so at this point, it's all about us. Property is defined by very specific boundaries. Thomas Jefferson said, liberty is unobstructed action according to our will. Unobstructed action according to our will. Do whatever we want to. But he said rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within the limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. So, we have our rights, but we can't go do anything with those rights if it infringes on the rights of another. It's all about boundaries. Our property within boundaries. I passed a lot of fences and things, a lot of farms and ranches around here. Boundaries. You carefully define the boundaries so that you have a relationship between you and your neighbor is carefully defined. So we get together as neighbors in a community, and our boundary in our community is drawn around us by the communities around us. The boundary around our state is drawn around us by the boundaries of the other states around us. And all of that is held together by a single item, one thing that makes us we the people, makes us one people, and that's the Constitution of the United States. So, as it states up here, the way to secure rights is by maintaining boundaries, clearly defined boundaries. Just going to jump over to a different screen here real quickly. So, the key in keeping our republic is enforcing boundaries. Now, the problem is that we have all different types of people that want to come out and break those boundaries, whether it's criminals, whether it's our neighbors, whether it's even government, okay? And they want to fight us over those boundaries. And it's important that we protect those boundaries. Now, the way that things are perceived right now in our country is that when we decide to enforce those boundaries, we're this angry mob that's violent and somehow radical. Aren't we labeled as extreme, radical, anti-government folks? And sometimes we embrace that labeling because we get so frustrated with government. You're anti-government. You better believe it because look at what they're doing. Folks, don't let that labeling happen because we are not anti-government. In fact, we love government. We love very clearly defined boundaries, very clearly defined limited government, separation of powers. We love the government. It's others that are trying to break those boundaries down that are truly the anti-government folks. So don't let this anti-government label be put upon you. You are trying to fight for justice and fight for those boundaries. Now, in order to do that, Jefferson said the qualifications for self-governing society are not innate. They are the result of habit and long training. The only true corrective of constitutional abuses is education. A couple of organizations that can help out with this. One is the National Center for Constitutional Studies. Many of you are probably familiar with them. They're right down the road, about 6 hours from here in southern Idaho. A great organization. They published the 5,000-Year Leap, Making America, a lot of great stuff. In fact, they also do Making America Seminar, And back here at this back table, I do have some items for sale. One is the DVD, Making of America Seminars from NCCS. Another is a book that I wrote a few years ago that has that Old South church story in it and a whole lot of other stories that you can tell your kids. Great stories about the founding of America. So good stuff over there. I want you to check that out. But another organization that I want you to check out is the Center for Self-Governance. Now, in order to tell you a little bit about the Center for Self-Governance, I'm going to introduce my beautiful daughter that came with me today. And she's going to tell you a little bit about some experiences that she's had and about the Center for Self-Governance. Now, I'm going to tell you very quickly about Lane. The first time she ever came to a Making of America seminar, she was 8 years old. When she was 9 years old, she took it upon herself to start putting herself to sleep every night by listening to the audio book, The 5,000-Year Leap. And she did that for about 2 years. So it's ingrained in her. Now, she came to this Making of America seminar when she was 8 years old. And after the seminar, she said, "Daddy, why can't we shoot off fireworks in our own home?" In Arizona at the time, no fireworks, not even sparklers, nothing. And I said, "Well, because government thinks that we're not responsible enough to shoot off fireworks in our own home." She said, "But Daddy, you shoot off big fireworks at the Constitution Week event." She's right. Every September for Constitution Week, put on a big event in Gilbert, Arizona, and we shoot off big 4th of July style fireworks. And she said, "Do you shoot off?" And I said, "Well, I have to get permission from government." She said, "They give you permission though, right?" And I said, "Well, obviously, because we do it." And she said, "So they think you're responsible enough to shoot off the big ones, but not the little ones?" I said, "Yeah, it doesn't make too much sense, does it?" She said, "No." And then she keeps asking me, "Why is government doing this? Why is government doing that?" Finally, out of frustration, she says, "Why don't we just tell government to stop?" Well, I said, "That'd be pretty nice." I said, "But government's gotten a little bit too much control, a little bit too powerful." And she said, "Oh, like a king." I said, "Exactly like a king." And then she said, "Oh no, don't tell me we have to go through that again." Talking about the Revolutionary War and all that stuff. And I told her, I said, "Hey, we've got some great mechanisms in which we can help keep our country on track." And so that's exactly what Lane's going to talk about, is the Center for Self-Governance and how to keep our country on track. So welcome my beautiful daughter, Lane Norton.
Hello, my name is Lane Norton. I'm 15 years old and I live in Gilbert, Arizona. And I am so thankful to live in this great republic. I'm sure many of you here know that this is a republic, but my generation is being taught that we live in a democracy. James Madison observed, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and in general have been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their death." John Adams stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There was never a democracy that did not commit suicide." Violence and contention sounds a lot like politics today. Americans, young and old, are used to living in a passive democracy. But the fact of the matter is that the United States is a republic, not a democracy. We no longer understand what a republic is and how to live in one. Even if we do recognize that America is a republic, we treat it like a democracy by focusing only on winning elections and fighting the battles of partisan issues. Just like James Madison said, turbulence and contention. For most people, the only involvement they have in our republic is voting. Voting is a democracy action. While we certainly should cast an informed vote, if that is our only involvement, then the result will be democracy, not republic. This is understandable because our human nature is to gravitate toward either democracy or monarchy. Let me share with you an experience that I had in observing human nature as it relates to our relationship with society. Last semester, my American history teacher, Mrs. Denton, created a simulation paralleling American history. On the first day of class, she made it very clear that our class was under what she called teacher's rules. Mrs. Denton instituted a series of rules that soon became very unfair and unreasonable. For example, the color of shirt that you were wearing was reflected in your grade that day. Every day there was a chosen color of shirt. If you were wearing that shirt color, then you had to complete your in-class work for yourself, and another person could give you their work to do as well. As our class studies approached the signing of the Declaration of Independence, I got really tired of these rules. I decided to rebel, but in a peaceful manner, because I needed a good grade in that class, which I could only get from her. Another rule that Mrs. Denton created stated that we had to address her by Your Majesty. I got tired of addressing her in this way and sent her an email with a question on a homework assignment where I purposely addressed her as Mrs. Denton, not Your Majesty. I signed the email Lane Norton and simply put the following quote from John Locke. Whenever the executive endeavored to reduce the people to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. I wanted to make it known that I recognized my unalienable rights, and that I no longer recognized Mrs. Denton's authority as a queen, but that I still respected her as a teacher. I devised a plan to get my colony and other colonies to declare our independence and sign an agreement. One thing that really surprised me was who agreed to this. Soft-spoken people who I would have never imagined would disobey the class rules were so willing to help. But people who I thought would jump on board in a second were afraid of their grade dropping. I started to get many people on board, but I did not have enough support from the whole class. So I asked Andrew, one of my classmates, to help me. Andrew got a lot more colonies to declare their independence. I sent an email to Mrs. Denton stating that I had been chosen as an ambassador to keep peaceful relations between our new country and Her Majesty's kingdom. I sent this email as if no political union had ever existed between us, and we had always been our own country. I addressed her as Your Majesty in respect for her position, but not as one of her subjects. I sent her the following. Some of the colonies have formed an alliance, and from here on out, we would like to be known as Congress. I have been appointed as the first ambassador to build a friendly relationship with Her Majesty's government and Congress. Sincerely, Ambassador Lane. She responded saying that she would be happy to talk to us about independence and was fully supportive of our decision to self-govern. The next class period, she said that we could be free if we wrote and unanimously signed a declaration declaring our independence and complete an in-class assignment. The next class period, we had to choose a chairman for our convention. Both Andrew and I were nominated. Andrew won, which I was fine with because I felt like we had built a respectful relationship and he would listen to my ideas. To divide the work in half and do it efficiently, Andrew divided the class. Half worked on the declaration and half worked on the class assignment. He purposely assigned me to the class assignment and himself to the declaration. Trusting in his judgment, I helped with the class assignment. My group finished early and I started listening and watching what was happening. Andrew started to become what he hated most, a tyrant. He shut down people's thoughts and told them they were stupid and made people conform to his ideas. I then realized that he had me work on the in-class assignment because he did not want the competition. He wanted it done his way. After 2 class periods, we got the declaration signed, and we were now a free country. As a new country, we needed to establish a constitution. A chairman of the class constitutional convention needed to be chosen. Both Andrew and I were nominated once again, and I ended up winning by a majority. As the new class president, I knew exactly how I wanted to lead the class. As we started to have discussions, I noticed that the class was getting really crazy and talkative. Then I realized why. Just like the founding fathers did when writing the Articles of Confederation, I was leaning too far towards anarchy. When coming out of an oppressive circumstance and fear to keep your freedom alive, it is natural to fall towards the opposite extreme. Another thing that I noticed about myself was that I was looking for special privileges and wanted everyone to acknowledge that I was their leader. I could feel the tug of wanting more and more control. After ratifying the class constitution, John, a close friend of Andrew, was elected as the class president. I was disappointed that I was not elected and felt entitled to the presidency. There went that tug toward control again. We went about 2 months being governed by this constitution. As we were approaching our class final, Andrew proposed a law to Congress that made John the king of our history class. The law passed, and now my class was back to where it started, with a monarch. I was really intrigued that my history class went from monarchy to a republic back to monarchy. I observed the human nature in many people. For example, John, who wanted to separate from the monarch only to become the dictator himself. And I even felt the same natural tendency within myself. So how do we overcome this human nature? Thomas Jefferson said, "The qualifications for self-government are not innate. They are the result of habit and long training." Jefferson himself needed practice keeping the republic, and so do we. Just like John, Andrew, and I felt the tug of wanting more control, human instincts interfere with our desire to be a republic. Thus, we fall back into the natural tendency of democracy or monarchy. In only 3 years, I can go to college and live on my own. I want to inherit a republic for myself, my children, and my grandchildren. This is a republic if you can keep it through habit and long training. I would love to take credit for my observations on human nature during our class simulation. But during the simulation, I was coincidentally taking classes with the Center for Self-Governance. CSG is an organization that teaches civics like none other. CSG is dedicated to training citizens in applied civics founded on the belief in the capacity of mankind for self-governance. CSG builds individual habit and practice in self-governance to grow a culture and cultivate a community of keeping the republic all over the United States. Through a series of classes and training exercises, the Center for Self-Governance's curriculum helps students build relationships with people inside and outside of government, helps them understand the United States Constitution, their own state constitution, and their local systems of government without being bipartisan or issue-focused. The choices that I made during my American history simulation were focused by CSG training, or influenced by CSG training. The Center for Self-Governance's training helped me spot human behaviors of monarchy, oligarchy, democracy, and anarchy. They showed me why it was fairly easy for my class to go from a republic to a monarchy in a heartbeat. Through all 5 levels of classes and the training exercises that go along with them, a student learns how to engage in and live in a republic. The approach that CSG takes on teaching civics is very unique. With a close analysis of the Founding Fathers' writings, the Center for Self-Governance's curriculum is very articulate and refined. They actually teach you how to live in a republic. The training exercises reinforce what is learned in class. Through the experiences of doing the training, I have built trusted relationships with the administrators at my high school, city and state officials, and have had many great conversations with my friends and adults alike. There are active teams and classes in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, and many other states all over the nation. Visit their website at centerforselfgovernance.com to see if there's a class near you. If not, contact CSG and host a class yourself. I know you'll be amazed at how much you learn and how effective the training will be in your life. Keeping the Republic takes practice every day, from young and old, black and white, male and female. The Center for Self-Governance gives the tools to keep the Republic, because this is a republic if you can keep it. Thank you.
Can you imagine all the fun, great discussions I have with this young lady? Fantastic. Thank you, Lane. Center for Self-Governance. Great stuff. One of my favorite quotes from Thomas Jefferson: enlighten the people. Enlighten the people, and tyranny and oppression will vanish like evil spirits at the dawn of day. Folks, it's critical that we educate ourselves, that we understand fundamental principles, that we understand the basis of why our country was founded, how it was founded, and how to maintain it. And so, like I said, there's a few materials I've got, my book and the Making of America seminar, which is 8 hours of instruction on the Constitution. We go right from the preamble to the 27th Amendment. So I encourage you to look through that. But with that, I leave you with one last admonition: to simply go forth and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Bill Norton, folks, and Lane. Can you imagine all of those high school teachers all across the country with your kids in there going to be pulling their hair out saying, "What's wrong with these kids?" Great job, young lady. Okay, we are going to take a break. It's going to give you an opportunity to go back there and fund a trip for 7th and 8th graders, John Day, to go to Washington, D.C. Did I mention they're going to hand deliver a letter to the president that says "Free the Hammonds"? Thought I might have forgot that. We will convene 2 other things that you're going to want to know about. Jeanette is sitting back there and will sign your book. Funnel through there. At 7:30, we will pick it up again right here. And one other thing, there are 2 silent auction items. They are each baskets. Each basket includes LaVoy's favorite items, from movies to books. And I'm willing to bet if you don't have a Constitution, there'll be one in there. With that said, please mingle, enjoy yourselves, eat some spaghetti. I'll see you right here at 7:30.